Shalom, I'm Phil. This video is one of many in a series of informal online lectures and perhaps a bit of a rant about entertainment, progress, society, or all of the above. Originally crafted for a class, I hope this reaches a far wider audience in this format. And frankly, I don't give a damn if it seems a little bit unprofessional. I want to speak as a consumer and sometimes a wary critic. I'll also share my perspectives on other topics, particularly on how they shape the entertainment and how they impact both the audiences who consume it and the creators who make it. Overall, I'll be focusing on writing, world building, and a lot more. Alright, let's get started. Class is now in session. In the realm of world building, one of the most deliciously overlooked tools is cross-genre biology. Take inspiration from the elegant weirdness of sci-fi aliens in the Orville, Mass Effect, Ben 10, or other sci-fi IPs. Then twist that brilliance with the arcane flair of fantasy. Why limit yourself to just elves, dwarves, or orcs, when you could have a psionic race of genie-like beings, cloud-dwelling necrotic slugs, or something like dwarves as craftsmen, but something else entirely, while having a specific vocational job or aspect, such as a sapient race of snakes that monitor, maintain, and conjure pathways between worlds. And sadly, no, we're not talking about that kind of racism. But you know what? We can have race wars. We just need to mix them up in a creative sense. Here are two examples. And starting right off the bat, we have a bit of heated rivalry over Thor's promoted scam. I don't know why white boys hell-bent on our vocally mismatched Asian. As for the second one, the jokes write themselves.
I've got a couple of ideas for problematic changes to Harry Potter characters. Trans Dobby. Master has taken Dobby's cock! Dobby is she!
And now back to our regular programming. As stated earlier, adding assets from sci-fi would help a lot in bringing in true diversity and innovation to fantasy, instead of just swapping color palettes to milk fans out of money. With this method, you can make both new and old races feel fresh again, while still preserving the mystique of that classic fantasy flavor. Too many shows, games, comics, and especially isekai manga flatten elves, dwarves, demons, and beastmen into pseudo-humans, while gaslighting audiences into thinking that there's something different and much more. Most of these beings are barely different, possessing gimmicks, vague attitudes, and barely any supernatural or historical weight in their creation and plot development, beyond acting like leftovers from D&D, Lord of the Rings, or World of Warcraft. You can easily drop things like the Krogan, Hanar, Collectors, Yautja, Wookiees, or Protoss into high fantasy, urban fantasy, or a hybrid futuristic fantasy setting. The latter I want to trademark as Feltior, to avoid using the paradoxical label sci-fi fantasy or magic sci-fi. Anyway, we need to give them a solid history, old grudges, inherited sins, strange magical quirks, or cultural practices tied to the setting. Next would be some friction between species. If humans already struggle to live together because of culture, religion, rivalries, resources, and ideology, then races with genuinely different biology, instincts, and limits should feel even harder to fully understand, let alone peacefully coexist with. On a side note, not all of isekai genre is bad, but what I mean is new age isekai slop. Better examples would be Digimon Adventure, Fushigi Yugi, Inuyasha, and Spirited Away. As I recall, the original runs were quite liked and beloved in multiple nations. While some of them had sequels, they were not so well received or had some weird elements. But overall, the original runs are the quintessential and better versions of isekai compared to the, again, new age isekai slop. Also, here's some quick-fire recommendations of the very few good new age isekais: The Faraway Paladin, Saga of Tanya the Evil, Campfire Cooking Isekai, and The Ideal Sponger Life. And frankly, do not miss when evil creatures were allowed to just be evil. Sometimes you want demon slaying, monster hunting, and brutal villain factions without every creature being rewritten into a misunderstood victim or activist metaphor. A horde of angry, greedy, merciless monsters. It's not hard to imagine when human history already gave us bandits, tyrants, scalpers, and terrorists. Now push that line of thinking further, with beings that are literally built from nightmare matter, corrupted instincts, or nature's too alien to feel empathy the way we do. And suddenly the danger feels fun, clear, and mythic again. Can't we just have a little fun? Wiping out hordes of enemies, feeling the thrill of danger, without actually dying or having to feel guilty about it. I mean, sure, a few people or studios take it too far, or get weirdly personal with it. But most of what we watch, read, or play is just about enjoying the legends of old, or playing around with the fantasy of being the wrath of God. It is just fun escapism. We all have our own problems, and we all got a full plate. I mean, most of humanity really did the 180 on AI. Aside from Detroit Become Human and the 2000 film AI, we even had a movie about a wife android revolution with some girl boss energy. I mean, it's just kind of funny how we once had movies that oversympathized with robots until they started actually becoming real. Kind of weird when that thing happens so often nowadays. Yet there's hope. For even with our differences, in more than a few stories, we discover valor. Like an inspirational beacon parting the fog of war. We find purpose in fighting for something worth dying for.
All pretty again. Take care of her, you hear?
We find love, for it is the fire that turns mere survival into a life worth living. We forge camaraderie in brotherhood and in the memory of Rome.
We have been summoned by the gods, and you want to flee? I should kill you myself. You bring dishonor to your men. You bring dishonor to me. You bring dishonor to Rome! I swear to you, Centurion, Rome will not fall. Not today. Today, we fight.
And most importantly, we find admiration in each other. Before we focus on the firstborn, here's my favorite entry to the Feltior race category.
Let's see them try to stop a Krogan airdrop.
Rex! We have an unauthorized landing.
And who authorized you to hold my race hostage?
The Krogans. But what are they? Plain and simple, they're the awesome meat tanks of Mass Effect that we're gonna drop into fantasy, with a bit more natural affinity to psionics or some form of battle magic, like the Asari are to biotics and beauty. A new type of race template that is both very non-human and OP enough to have their standard per capita stand above the rest and just short of a vampire lord or a dragon. Mix in the Yautja race too, you know, from the Predator movies. Just imagine the potential. Pumping the power of the Krogans into brutal apex hunters of the Predators would fuck up the mortal realms. We can have these powerful alien brutes from Mass Effect amplified with the phenomenal jumping, exotic hunting tech, and ruthless predatory skills of the Yautja. Oh, as well as their sweet cloaking tech. The best part is they can also compete with and even partially replace several classic threat roles without making the setting feel emptier. Orcs usually fill the niche of brute hordes, vampires often cover the predator stealth hunters, and demon cults thrive on corruption, bloody rituals, and dangerous bargains. A Krogan Yautja hybrid can sit between all of these. They have the mass, aggression, and the breeding and warband pressure to threaten kingdoms like orcs. Alternatively, they can also be the shadowy stealth hunters because they have the predatory aura, trophy culture, and fear factor to rival the menace of vampires without needing to lean on seduction or aristocratic aesthetics. and they can create cult-like behavior through warrior lodges, blood rites, ancestor worship, and psionic traditions, without just being another demon faction in different clothing. In other words, they are not redundant. They are a new pressure point in the ecosystem of threats. These Krogan hybrids are valuable because they're more than just another enemy faction. Depending on the situation, they can become dangerous allies, powerful mercenaries, or even important trading partners. Their presence immediately raises the stakes of any story or conflict. Every interaction with them carries a sense of tension and uncertainty due to their culture, strength, and unpredictable nature. This creates opportunities for memorable negotiations, uneasy partnerships, and difficult choices. Rather than relying on another familiar and friendly faction, introducing the Krogan hybrids can add greater drama, conflict, and reward to the narrative. That is a charm of them as a last resort people. They are powerful enough to tip wars, hunt monsters, break sieges, guard cursed frontiers, or sell brutal expertise that no softer civilization can match, yet unstable enough that every alliance comes with cost, fear, and careful compromise. And that, folks, gives the setting a stronger sense of danger and realism. Because sometimes, the most useful ally is not the one you trust, but the one you can barely manage to stand aside for one campaign, one contract, or one desperate hour. Now to the firstborn races, the legends of old, the pillars of magic and wonder, elves and dwarves. And yet sadly and recently, for the past 2 decades, we've had a shit ton of lousy versions of these otherworldly legends. Examples would be Rings of Power, Iskai Media Slop, or games such as Veilguard, and other such similar titles. They are often used as sudden backdrop to lure the attention of the audience. But they have no culture, no traditions, no rivalries, and barely any semblance of background build-up. Meanwhile, a lot of slop or activist authors have neither the patience, wisdom, nor skill to read or watch/play through actual lore and previous stories from any of the following. Although I would suggest choosing 3 from any of the following categories to make something wholly original and interesting. For beginners, I would suggest going with Warhammer Fantasy Before the End Times and Divinity Original Sin 1-2. As for the third, that's up to you, and best of luck. On screen is our past mistakes, and we have to learn from them. The awful writing frameworks for fantasy races like elves and dwarves usually fall into one of 3 categories. The first being background noise. They only serve as mascots, barely reminiscent of mainstream fantasy races. Elves reduced to immortal vegan archers or wizards, while dwarves are little more than antisocial blacksmiths, or severely drunken Scots. Barely a ripple to the plot or world building. Overall, they have the least screen time or influence in most settings. And how can we forget the quirky? Some modern quirky D&D sessions feel less like grand adventures and more like improv skits, chasing clips, and cheap laughs. Even the better campaigns eventually drown the fantasy in random drama, meme humor, and constant "look how weird we are" moments. And finally, propaganda. They are better than the previous 2 examples, but only in overall composition and are presented to be supernatural compared to the common man. But sadly in the end, they become props to validate the protagonist, like a trophy hunt to prove a feat of strength or magic, or in some cases, to prove the protagonist can easily brush off such foes. Afterwards, they either become a fawning fanboy legion or husks in exile, often made inferior to non-ancient European tech or modern ideas. Examples would be ending monarchies for democracy, shurikens, sniper rifles, video game mechanics, fruit serums, or katanas. And here we have the strawman that haunts the modern audience. These are overused and tiring tropes, born from the complaints of activist authors and journals. They're actually an affront to consumer enjoyment and escapism. The fantasy races are often depicted as warped caricatures of real-life oppressed tribesmen, enslaved, colonized, or slaughtered by the usual suspects on screen. The following are just straightforward, shallow strawmen with an extra serving of political incorrectness. The equivalent of any European or American white man empire, the Catholic Church, white straight men, angels, and capitalism or corporations. If anyone needs a refresher, here we have a more standardized version combining Tolkien and Norse interpretations of elves and dwarves. Here's how we solve the decline of enchantment with exclusivity. Overall, elves and dwarves need to appear less often to keep the mystique and hype strong, while legends and environmental storytelling keep them present in the minds and curiosities of mortal and mage society. The alien fantasy options mentioned earlier are there for variety, so we don't have to oversaturate the setting with elves, dwarves, hobbits, gnomes, and orcs. We can still have something limited and mortal, yet exotic enough to exist alongside humans on a more regular and plot-focused basis. Regarding elves, they can be a force between scenes and events. This newer form of elves should feel less like a mortal race and more like radiant fae arbiters, sacred envoys, and otherworldly specialists who move through history with purpose rather than permanence. Ancient, cunning, and rarely wasteful of words. They work best appearing only when the stakes are highest, offering guidance, testing worthiness, striking bargains, or enacting brief interventions before vanishing from sight, all the while watching, scheming, and pulling strings between realms. To be more concise, they will be background guides, testers of worth, and quiet arbiters who judge rulers, heroes, and desperate petitioners. Or they can be brokers of impossible goods, sacred oaths, hidden lore, and elite services of almost frightening caliber. This option can be useful to be a rival to dwarves, or they can be timely interveners in moments of great need, acting like divine agents, living avatars, or veiled hands of fate, in a fashion similar to angels and the fae, subtle but still impactful. That way they stay graceful, wise, magical, and sophisticated, without becoming ordinary fantasy civilians with pointed ears. They should feel like being sought with reverence and caution, not casual drinking companions at the local tavern or the usual exotic and haughty territorial neighbors. For more toned-down exclusivity, to be kept within the mortal realms, keep them elite, scarce, and costly to engage, inhabiting places too cursed or lethal for mortals, and deeply reluctant to deal with the outside world unless necessary, or they have schemes to hatch. They shouldn't think merely like long-lived humans, but like refined beings of magic, forged by centuries of purpose, ritual, distance, and grief. The latter you can exchange for obsession. Overall, their realm should be otherworldly and magical, but treacherous enough in a fae sense, making mortal visits and any form of non-elven permanent settlement or harvesting business impossible. As for the racial passives and powers, add in a few innate powers aside from being immortal and genetically graceful. Each one will be born with an arcane spirit, so let's make them all natural-born wizards, between novice and mid-tier, that can grow even more potent over time, with ritual, study, and practice. And now for the passives, abilities that are second nature to them, similar in how breathing and walking is to humans. Starting with Featherfall, then Hover, Eat Metal, greater intellectual learning speed and capacity, superhuman reflexes, and defensive facing. The latter similar to Ghosts, but a more toned-down version. Half the attacks would harmlessly pass through them. And now for the limited abilities. These are skills and abilities limited with daily charges, and each one obtained either through bloodline or in how they were raised through an elven clan. Examples would be Mirror Image, Minor Magnetism, Cryomancy, and Mass Fey Conjuration. With all this and more, let's make elves great again. As for the stoic firstborn, the dwarves, The classical portrayal of dwarves found in Tolkien, World of Warcraft, and Warhammer Fantasy established a people whose identity was forged in iron, stone, and tradition. Every saga, expedition, and forgotten hall reflected a civilization built upon craftsmanship, resilience, and ancestral duty. Put simply, if you want to have your world building to rock and have your dwarves be storied and ambitious, they gotta be under a stoic patriarchy. For total exclusivity, mountain dwarves sit atop of the craftsmanship hierarchy as the most skilled and versatile bespoke craftsmen, skilled warriors, and resource harvesters, serving both mortal and immortal factions. Meanwhile, others among them tread a different path, operating as bankers and power brokers, treading diplomacy and commerce between races. Think the High Table in John Wick, the fake courts in the Dresden Files, or the cash shops of MMOs. Through steadfast adherence to traditions, duties, and wisdom of the mountains, their ancestral paragons and their clans grants them immortality approaching demigod status, along with a stone sense and physical prowess rivaling that of towering earth elementals. The spirits of their ancestors may further bless them with heightened wisdom, sharper senses, greater fortune, and an uncanny attraction to wealth. But only when they are deemed worthy of such guidance or spiritual intervention. The moment they become surface dwarves, they forfeit much of their stone sense, the blessings of their mountain-born origins, and the support of the wealthy guilds that have endured and prospered for countless eons on behalf of the dwarven race. To be a bit more specific on the lives of the dwarves, they branch into many respective callings, each bound by the same unyielding discipline and devotion to clan and legacy. Some become stoic and stubborn guardians, standing watch over ancient holds, sacred vaults, and forgotten passes, for centuries without wavering. Others serve as incorruptible soldiers, whose loyalty cannot be bought, whose resolve cannot be broken, and whose unwavering discipline makes them the immovable backbone of any army fortunate enough to have their services. Meanwhile, a good quarter of the dwarven race chose a different path, away from the smithy, the coin, or the way of the warrior. Many embrace the dangers beyond the mountains, as ambitious explorers, prospectors, and treasure seekers, forever chasing forgotten kingdoms, ancient relics, and the veins of untapped wealth. Last but not the least, earn renown as daring monster slayers, or enter a grim dark fate as sanctioned mage hunters, entrusted to confront rogue sorcerers, cursed relics, and supernatural threats that ordinary warriors dare not face. And dare I say, especially those considered extremely heretical. For an alternative option, semi-exclusivity requires a new framework. We could have them as fellow citizens. Dwarves pair well with humans, as if built to match, but only if humans are made more interesting. A good way is to have humans be capable of draining mana from natural resources, and in great numbers passively tempering the unpredictability of the supernatural, with a small fraction functioning as assistant mages who channel ambient mana into runes and alchemy. Meanwhile, dwarves contribute rune crafting, supernatural stone shaping, superb expensive craftsmanship, and mentoring. They also produce resilient warriors with intense magical resistance, high durability, and supernatural coordination. Now, unfortunately, other mortal races will not have the luxury of having immortal dwarves integrated into their societies, as they are more vulnerable to magic or far more dependent on it. These semi-exclusive dwarves will be called surface dwarves. They did not choose isolation nor the closer bond to the earth and the heavier traditions that come with it, and it shows. They are not as gifted in rune crafting, lack immunity to non-greater spellcraft, and sadly cannot draw wisdom or warnings from their ancestors as often, as well as having a shorter lifespan. The trade-off, however, is still beneficial. Surface dwarves settled in controlled mana locations can test new techniques without waiting centuries for approval from grumbling elders and stingy crafting guilds. They will also have the opportunity to forge pacts with other mortals far more often, be able to reproduce more easily, and compete in a less perfectionist market. But in the end, in the core of their being, they remain deeply traditional and largely reclusive, engaging with humans, outsiders, and external activities only for crafting, finance, war, politics, celebrations, visiting mountain holds, and hunting.
You won't survive this! I am a maker! That task defines my very purpose! And the reaping of souls defines your own! There is no escaping it!
A final piece of advice: create at least 3 factions for each non-human race. The races of elves and dwarves will feel less like shoehorned assets if this is done properly. Not all 3 factions need to have a dominant impact or major presence in your setting, but they help establish rivalries, tensions, and cultural or racial differences. The 3rd faction, for example, can serve as a neutral ally, a protectorate city-state, a hidden village that houses a secret police force, or a network of mercenary colonies made up of wandering nomads. In any case, this is it for part 1. In part 2, we'll explore how to restore the concept of evil and the aspect of monstrosity in fantasy. Until our next lesson, remember, not all those who wander are lost. Shabbat Shalom and Ave Domine Lucis.
רוץ, אל תעצור עכשיו! כל העיר בוערת באור קר, אבל לב כמו תוך מכר רוטט, מודף בשמש אין עוד מחר באמת. כל הגוף דאור חזק, כל בפנים קורא תנצח, גם אם הכביש בוער מתחת, מרדף בשמש, אנחנו לא נוותר אף רגע. פניות חדות פה, סמטאות בלי שם, מעלינו גגות מתחת רק דם חם, צלים רצים בי כמו סרט מואץ, אם מפספס צד הכל מתפרק כבר עכשיו. רוץ, אל תעצור עכשיו. כל העיר בוערת באור קו, לב כתוף מכה רוטט, מודף בשמש אין עוד מחר באמת. כל הגוף דאור חזק, כול בפנים קורא תנצח, גם אם הכביש בוער מתחת, נדבך בשמש, אנחנו לא נוותר אף רגע. סופר נשימות